some news on voter turnout during the 2018 midterm elections. This is a leading indicator of what we might expect in a 2020 election, and the news from yesterday evening is simple. Young people are turning out in historic numbers. According to Jordan Misra at the U.S. Census Bureau, writing about the 2018 election, and yes, this is your tax dollars in action, quote, voter turnout went up among all voting age and major racial and ethnic groups. 53% of the citizen voting age population voted in 2018, the highest midterm turnout in 4 decades, while the 2014 election had the lowest, end quote. I think we should digest that one for a moment because there are a lot of important numbers there and some of them are actually implied rather than stated. So, to recap, turnout overall was the highest in 40 years. But the midterm right before that one, the midterm in 2014, had the lowest turnout in more than 70 years. That change is shocking, and it has real implications for what may happen in the general election coming up in 2020. But that's not all. Things get really interesting when you focus in on younger voters. Here's one more bit from Misra. Quote, among 18 to 29-year-olds, voter turnout went from 20% in 2014 to 36% in 2018, the largest percentage point increase for any age group, a 79% jump, end quote. Well, okay, so saying that a little over a third of young voters came out to vote in 2018 may not sound like much, right? But to put that in perspective, the Washington Post reports that the 2018 turnout for that age range was the highest in 100 years. Let me say that one more time for the folks in the back. Young people turned out at the highest rate in a century in the 2018 midterms. The Post also noted that turnout among voters ages 30 to 44 went up as well. Overall, this means that everybody from age 18 all the way up to age 44 is turning out in much higher numbers than we've seen in a very long time. Here's a bit from the Washington Post. Quote, Democrats won 67% support among voters younger than 30 and 58% among those ages 30 to 44. Both groups in which turnout increased dramatically compared with 2014, end quote. The Post also spoke to Michael McDonald, an associate professor at the University of Florida and an expert in voter turnout. McDonald called the 2018 midterm, quote, the storm of the century, end quote. And Ed Kilgore over at New York Magazine also looked at what McDonald had to say. Quoting McDonald again, even states without competitive statewide elections saw record turnout, which makes clear that national factors, including support and opposition to the Trump presidency, were driving factors to the polls, end quote. And Kilgore went on to comment on that, quote, with Trump himself on the ballot, any boost he provided to midterm turnout should continue, if not intensify, in 2020. But as the same report showed, another factor that apparently helped improve turnout in 2018 should do the same in 2020. The steady spread of reforms making it easier to register to vote and to cast votes from home, end quote. All right, so the takeaway here is that if Democrats put a viable candidate in the field in 2020, just based on the raw voter turnout numbers we're seeing lately, that candidate has a good shot of winning the race. And that's especially true if the candidate can build a coalition that explicitly includes and appeals to younger voters. That does not mean the candidate must actually be a young person, but it does mean the candidate has to speak seriously about issues that matter to that group.